Imagine this for a second. You hit it off with a girl from the bar, you go out the next day, and you pick her up in a Camry. Yeah, she might think that you're a responsible guy, but most probably she's gonna think that work isn't going too well. That's why I've gathered 5 cars under $5,000 that will instantly grab everyone's attention. From a sports car to an SUV, I've got it all. And I'll tell you exactly what versions to look for, so you don't spend your salary on parts. Oh, and the last one is my favorite. I'm Sven, and this is Burnout. Let's go. Number 1. The Saab 900 Turbo. I know what you're thinking, buying a 40-year-old car from a company which doesn't exist anymore must be a nightmare. Well, not exactly. Saab sold almost 1,900,000 in its 15-year run, so there are still plenty of parts. As well as a cult following which designates its entire life on keeping Saabs on the road. So there's still plenty of parts, as well as know-how. On top of that, in the good old days, Saab had the same reliability reputation as Volvo. There are some stories of these cars going over 1,000,000 miles. The Saab 900 Turbo had a long run from 1978 to 1993 with a facelift in 87. I won't bore you, here's a graph of which year made what power, you can pause it if you're interested. But you know, in a turbo, these numbers are just a moo point. You know, a cow's opinion. It doesn't matter. You can always tune it. And why will it turn heads? Because it's a Saab.
Saab? What the hell is that? It's Swedish. It's sporty. It's got a key in the middle.
And of course, you put it on some cool 3-spoke wheels, you lower it a little bit, and chef's kiss. And the way it drives, it's a sensation. It's got a longitude-mounted engine with a transaxle like almost no other front-wheel drive car ever. This makes the engine sit as far behind as possible, which basically makes it a front mid-engine car. So, what models to look for? 1989 and newer. This was the final countdown of the Saab 900 Turbo, and all of the issues beforehand with transmission, engine, suspension and electronics were already refined. On top of that, before 88 all turbos were 8-valve, which made less power and broke more. Oh, and only manuals, of course. I don't even think I need to say this. Number 2, the third generation Cayenne VR6. Yeah, VW put the VR6 in a Cayenne as well. Oh, and for those who don't know, the VR6 is a renowned VW engine where the cylinders sit in a narrower V-shape, so they take less space and can be put in smaller engine bays. And that's why VW put it everywhere, from the Golf to the Phaeton and even the Cayenne. Anyways, this, paired with some other important factors, makes the first generation Cayenne surprisingly inexpensive to maintain. And meanwhile, you drive a Porsche, which can take you from Sunset Boulevard through the canyons onto an off-road trail. That's what makes these early SUVs like the ML, the X5 and the Cayenne such great vehicles. The Germans spotted a new market but actually had no idea how people would use these cars. So they poured everything in. Luxury, speed, the ladder-on-frame chassis, locking diffs and looks. Even though the last one could be debated.
Honestly, I have seen more attractive gangrenous wounds than this.
About engines. The VR6, or in Europe we also got the 3-liter TDI. Both are widely available and very reliable options. The VR6 makes 250 or 290 horsepower, while the 3-liter TDI makes 240. Both are respectable numbers by themselves, but in a 2-ton chassis, the Cayenne is not really a red light killer. Then we have the 4.8-liter V8. The regular makes between 350 and 385 horsepower, while the turbo version makes between 450 and 520 horsepower. The naturally aspirated is somewhat reliable and run away from the turbo. It's not worth it. Some other things you gotta look for. First of all, run away from the air suspension. It's incredibly expensive to maintain. About gearboxes, the automatic is actually the better option here, since it was put from the VR6 to the Turbo S version, same transmission. Overall, the sweet spot is a VR6 on coil springs with an automatic transmission and 2008 and newer. After the facelift in 07, a lot of issues were fixed and the Cayenne doesn't look like a fat, ugly cross-eyed whore anymore. Number 3. The third generation Mercedes CLS, the pioneer in the 4-door coupes. Yeah, before the A7, 8 Series, Panamera, or the Mercedes-AMG GT 4-door 63 SD Performance 4MATIC Plus.
It's the Mercedes-Benz AMG GT.
Yes, and it's
63.
Yes, and it's
That's
absolutely.
E.
Yes, and here it is.
4MATIC.
And we have it today in blue.
4-door.
Thank you. And
Coupe.
Okay, is that it?
I think I got everything.
There was only one 4-door coupe, the Mercedes CLS. In 2002, the guys from Stuttgart decided that there could be a new segment in the automotive world, a love child between the practical 4-door sedan and the beauty of the coupe. Hence, the CLS was born. I don't think people appreciate how gorgeous this car is. Look at this one. Does it look like a car that costs 4,500 euros? And the interior, it's such a unique combination between a sporty steering wheel and gauges with some luxury wood trimming. The CLS is on the platform of the E-Class. They share the chassis, engine, suspension, interior tech. The styling isn't the only difference though. The CLS was lighter, lower and sportier. Now, it isn't really a sports car, but it's confidence inspiring in the corners. About engines, there's a bunch of options. A 3.2 or a 3.5 liter making 218 or 270 horsepower. The V8s are a 5 liter, 5.5 or a 5.4 supercharged in the IMG, making respectively 306, 380 or 470 horsepower. There were also a couple of diesel options in Europe, a 3 and a 3.2 liter making 220 or 240 horsepower. About the suspension, most of them came with the Airmatic, which was problematic. So go for cold springs. Final verdict, an incredible machine in both looks and drivability, but parts are a little bit more expensive and the history has to be looked through. Number 4, the Jaguar XJ8. This is a quiet legend in the automotive world. The Jaguar XJ has been driving gangsters around since the 60s, even before the S-Class, and the design basically hasn't changed since. That's why I love this car so much. You drive a pretty new car which looks like it was designed before we went to the moon. And the interior, it's got so much wood, it produces its own climate. This was basically Jaguar's S-Class, so they put S-Class materials and tech in there. It's just as refined and luxurious as the S-Class, but in the same time it's got better balance and steering feel. I mean, it's not a sports car, but it feels smaller than it actually is. I'm specifically talking about the 09 to 03 Jaguar XJ. And Jaguar did need half a century, but at the end they managed to make a somewhat reliable car. This second to last generation featured an aluminum chassis for the first time, so it rusts less, and also gearbox, suspension and engines are a lot more reliable. I mean, it's still no Honda, but it doesn't really look like a Honda, does it? The engine is a 4.2 liter V8 making 300 horsepower, and this was basically the most reliable engine that Jaguar has ever put in a car. There is also a supercharged version with 400 horsepower. It's not totally fragile, but the NA is a lot more robust. The double wishbone suspension as well as the 6-speed ZF automatic transmission are both very reliable. Issues are usually found in cooling and electronics. But finally, let's be honest, you don't buy this car because of reliability or speed or even looks. You buy it because it's a Number 5, and I wanted the last pick to be very special. So I decided to include a vehicle which, as shown on Top Gear, holds the number 2 spot for the gayest vehicle of all time.
This is a website, now it's called Out UK, and it's for the gay man. And then we found the top 10 gayest cars.
And do you know what's even more worrying is that the car I've just singled out for particular praise, the Jeep Wrangler's at number 2.
The Jeep Wrangler YJ Sahara. If this car makes you gay, I don't want to be straight. The Sahara was the luxury trim of the Wrangler. Now, when I say luxury, it came as standard with locking doors. It didn't really have massaging seats or anything. But that's because this is a proper off-roader, with solid axles, leaf springs all around with low-range gearbox. It's purposeful, and we all know if a car makes you suffer 90% of the time because it's incredible the other 10% of the time, that makes it very cool. Because the YJ sure sucks on the road.
This car wants to kill me.
No, it doesn't want.
It's loud, it's lofty, the MPG is critically low. But it looks so cool. It's also extremely easy to work on, parts are everywhere. About engines, you've got two options. A 2.5 liter 4-cylinder making 120 horsepower. It's robust, but very slow. The other option is a 4-liter V6 making 180 horsepower with a 0 to 60 of 8.2 seconds. Pretty respectable. And it's also very robust. Reliability issues are mainly electrical, and with those it seems to love to rust. Well boys, that's it. These are 5 cars that will turn heads, even though maybe some of them for the wrong reasons. I'm Sven and this is Burnout. Cheers!